It began on a rainy Thursday night, when the streets were empty and the sound of wet leaves skittered against the pavement. You weren't planning to stop anywhere. The rain had made the air heavy and strange, but the library's door stood open. It shouldn't have been open. The Hollow Street Library had been closed for years. From the sidewalk, you could see only darkness inside. Yet the smell of old paper and dust drifted toward you, warm and inviting, like a hearth for the mind. You stepped inside. The door swung shut behind you without a sound. Inside, the light was dim, not from lamps or bulbs, but from something softer, as if the air itself glowed faintly. Rows upon rows of shelves stretched farther than seemed possible, disappearing into shadows. It smelled of rain-soaked wood, leather bindings, and something faintly metallic, like the scent of keys. You noticed there was no desk for a librarian. No clock on the wall. And when you turned to glance back, the door you'd entered through was no longer there. You stood still, letting your eyes adjust. The shelves were impossibly tall, their upper reaches lost in shadow. Some of the books looked centuries old, bound in dark leathers with faded gold lettering, while others were slim, modern paperbacks with titles you'd never heard of. A soft sound reached your ears. At first you thought it was the patter of rain on the roof. But the rhythm was wrong. It was more like a whisper. Not one whisper, but many. You turned your head, trying to catch the words, but they scattered, like frightened birds. The sound came from every direction at once, from the shelves themselves. If you stood very still, you could almost make out phrases, though they faded before you could hold on to them. Somewhere far ahead, a book fell to the floor with a muffled thud. The sound seemed to echo for far too long. You began to walk toward it, the carpet underfoot swallowing your footsteps. You passed shelves with strange gaps, as though certain books had been removed long ago. In one aisle, you saw a book lying open on the floor, pages turned by a breeze that shouldn't exist here. But it wasn't a fallen book from before. You kept going, and the whispers grew louder. The whispers swelled and softened again, like the tide, always on the edge of forming meaning. You reached an aisle where the shelves leaned ever so slightly inward, as though conspiring. At the far end, on a low table, sat an old wooden box. It was a library card catalog, the kind that hadn't been used in decades. Its drawers were small, each with a brass pull and a slot for a label. Most of the labels were blank. You reached for one at random. The drawer slid open more easily than you expected, the smell of cedar wafting up. Inside were cards, handwritten, with looping black ink. They listed titles you didn't recognize. The Weight of Shadows, 13 Steps to an Unmarked Door, The House That Remembered. But one card sat slightly apart from the rest, as if it had been placed there recently. It was yellowed, the edges softened by time, but the space for the title was blank. Instead, there was only your name. The ink was fresh. Your hand trembled as you turned the card over. On the back, in the same black ink, was a single set of coordinates. You didn't know where they led. And then, faintly, you felt it, the unmistakable sensation that something, somewhere in the library, had just moved closer. You kept your eyes on the shadowed aisle ahead, trying not to think about the card still warm in your hand. The whispers had gone silent now, replaced by something slower. A sound that didn't belong in a library. It was deliberate, measured, the sound of something brushing along the edge of a shelf as it moved. Not footsteps, exactly, but a presence. You turned your head quickly, certain you'd see movement, but the space between the shelves was still. The ceiling above was lost in darkness, the shelves stretching upward so far they seemed to merge into it. You took a step forward, then another. The sound followed, faint but always keeping pace. At the end of the aisle, you paused. To your left, another corridor of books vanished into dimness. To your right, the same. But straight ahead, there was a break in the shelves. Beyond it, you saw a wider room, softly lit by a cold, bluish glow. Something about the light made you uneasy, yet you felt pulled toward it. It seemed to beckon in a way that wasn't entirely your own choice. You stepped forward. The air here felt thicker, as though the light itself had weight. And just as you reached the threshold into the glowing room, you heard the sound again. This time, it was directly behind you. You froze, every nerve braced for movement behind you. But when you turned, there was only the aisle, stretching back into shadow. No figure. No sound now, not even the faint hum of the building. Still holding the card with your name, you stepped into the glowing room. It was larger than you expected, a wide circular space with shelves lining the curved walls. In the center stood a massive wooden table, its surface worn smooth by years of use. Dozens of chairs surrounded it, all empty. Above the table hung a chandelier, its glass pieces glimmering faintly. But it wasn't lit. The strange blue light seemed to come from nowhere, seeping evenly into the air like mist. On the table lay an open book, thick and bound in pale leather. Its pages were blank. You ran a finger over the parchment, half expecting words to rise from the paper. Instead, you felt a strange vibration, almost like a heartbeat, but too slow, too heavy to be human. And then, a single word began to appear on the page, written in ink that formed as if by an invisible hand. The word was arrived. The heartbeat beneath the paper grew stronger. From the corner of your eye, you thought you saw someone sitting in one of the chairs, but when you turned, the chair was empty. Only the faint sound of it creaking remained. You backed away from the table, the book still pulsing faintly as if it were alive. The blue light made your skin feel cold, and you had the sudden urge to leave this room entirely. The archway you'd entered through was only a few steps behind you. But when you turned toward it, it wasn't there. Instead, a narrow aisle stretched out before you, lined with mismatched shelves. Some were polished and well-kept, others warped and splintered, their books swollen as if they had been soaked in water. A low hum filled the air here, and you couldn't tell if it came from the shelves or from somewhere beyond them. You stepped forward reluctantly. The floor felt uneven beneath the carpet, like something was buried beneath it. The books here had no titles on their spines, only strange, shifting patterns, like frost forming on glass. A sudden cold draft brushed past you, carrying the scent of damp stone and something metallic, like blood. You shivered, glancing over your shoulder. The reading room was gone completely. The hum grew louder, resonating in your chest. You realized it wasn't mechanical, it was a voice, too low and slow to be understood. And then, halfway down the aisle, you saw it. A book lying open in the middle of the floor, pages fluttering, though there was no wind. The shadows around it seemed darker than the rest of the aisle. You approached the open book slowly, every instinct urging caution. The fluttering pages slowed as you neared, until they stilled completely. The hum in the air quieted, leaving only your own breathing. The cover was black, smooth, and without a title. Its edges were frayed, as though it had been handled countless times. When you crouched and looked closer, you saw that the pages were filled with cramped handwriting, neat but unsettlingly precise. The ink was dark and glossy, as if it had just dried. Your eyes caught on a line near the top of the page. You take another step forward, ignoring the way the air presses against you like water. The sentence was about you. Not metaphorically, about this moment, right now. You turned the page quickly, scanning for more. There it was again. You glance over your shoulder, certain you are being watched, though the aisle remains empty. Your chest tightened. You hadn't even realized until reading the words that you were, in fact, looking over your shoulder. The next sentence chilled you most of all. You have already been here once before. A faint scratching sound rose from somewhere deep within the shelves. It was slow, deliberate, like something writing. Or something sharpening its nails. You looked down. The words on the page were changing. They were beginning to form your next movement. You stared at the shifting ink, frozen. The letters twisted and spread across the page, forming new sentences that hadn't been there a moment ago. You dropped the book. Your grip tightened reflexively, unwilling to obey. But as the thought crossed your mind, the book seemed to grow heavier in your hands, dragging your arms downward. It slipped from your grasp before you could stop it, landing with a soft thud. The ink swirled again. You hear the whisper. At first there was nothing, only the faint hum from earlier. Then, as if responding to the page, a whisper bloomed in your right ear, too close, too real. The words were soft, but you couldn't make them out. They felt less like sound and more like someone breathing their thoughts into your head. The page shifted again. You see the other version of yourself. You blinked hard, scanning the aisle. And there, at the far end, was a figure. It was standing perfectly still, half hidden in the dimness. Same height. Same build. Even from here, you knew it was you. The figure tilted its head, exactly as you just had. The book's ink moved once more, and you wished it hadn't. It smiles first. The other you didn't move at first. It just stood there in the dim aisle, that faint, wrong smile stretching across its face. It wasn't a happy smile, more like the slow curling of a secret. You took one hesitant step forward. It mirrored you perfectly. Another step. The same. But then, you stopped. And it didn't. The figure continued walking toward you, its steps silent on the carpet, its eyes locked to yours. The blue light seemed to fade the closer it got, pulling the aisle into a deeper shadow. You glanced down at the book, hoping for some clue. Its pages were now blank, every word gone. When you looked up again, the figure was only a few feet away. Up close, it was worse. It wasn't just you. Its face was subtly wrong. The eyes a fraction too wide, the skin a touch too pale, the smile revealing teeth just a bit too sharp. It leaned closer, as if to whisper. But instead, it turned its head and looked past you. Slowly. Like something was standing right behind you. Every muscle in your body screamed not to turn around. But the figure's gaze was fixed so intently past you that you felt pulled, as if your head were no longer entirely under your own control. You turned. The aisle stretched behind you exactly as it had before, rows of warped shelves, shifting shadows. But something was different. The air there was, thicker. It rippled faintly, the way heat bends light, only this was cold. And from that shimmer, a shape was forming. It wasn't human, though parts of it suggested the idea of a person, the long outline of limbs, the vague dip where a head should be. But it never solidified. It was as though your eyes couldn't decide what they were looking at. You realized it wasn't standing on the floor. It was hovering a few inches above it. And it was getting closer. Behind you, the other you let out a low laugh, your laugh, but drawn out, warped, like it had been stretched across a reel of magnetic tape. The shimmering figure paused only a few steps away, and the air around you dropped to a sharp, aching cold. Then, you felt something brush your arm. Not a hand. Not skin. Something else. Your first instinct was to jerk away, but the touch lingered, cold seeping through your sleeve as though whatever it was had sunk just beneath your skin. When you looked down, you expected to see frost or maybe a bruise forming. Instead, there was a single word written along your forearm in ink-dark lines. Retrieve. The letters pulsed faintly, almost as if they were alive. They didn't smear when you rubbed at them. They didn't fade. You turned sharply toward the shimmering figure, but it was already receding, dissolving into the shelves like mist caught in a sudden wind. The other you was gone too. No footsteps, no sound, just absence. But the aisle no longer felt empty. Somewhere close, something was waiting for you to obey. The pressure of expectation settled heavily in your chest. You glanced down the row of shelves. In the farthest corner, barely visible through the shadows, there was a section of the library you didn't remember seeing before, an archway of shelves bending inward, forming a kind of tunnel. And at the end of that tunnel, faintly glowing, a small wooden box. The ink on your arm flared warmer. The tunnel of shelves seemed too narrow to have ever been part of the library. Each step forward made the wood creak softly, though you couldn't tell if the sound came from the floor or the shelves themselves. The faint glow at the end pulsed like a heartbeat. With every pulse, the word on your arm seemed to throb in time, retrieve, a silent command you couldn't quite ignore. You reached the end of the tunnel. The box sat on a pedestal made from stacked books, some of which had their pages torn out, their spines warped as though they'd been underwater for years. The box itself was carved with intricate swirling lines that almost formed letters, but every time you tried to read them, they seemed to rearrange. No lock, no hinges, just a smooth lid. As you extended your hand, a sudden thought whispered through your mind. It wasn't your own. Once opened, it cannot be returned. You froze, your fingers hovering just above the surface. Then, behind you, from somewhere deep in the library, you heard your own voice call out, "Don't." The voice was close enough to make your skin prickle, but the echo in it suggested distance, as if it had traveled through more than just air to reach you. Slowly, you turned. There, halfway down the tunnel of shelves, stood another you. Not the smiling double from before, this one looked tired. Their clothes were torn, as though they'd been moving through the library for days, maybe weeks. A thin trail of dust clung to their shoulders. They stepped closer, shaking their head. "You can't open it," they said, their tone urgent but quiet, as if raising their voice might draw something nearer. "You'll make it find you faster." You wanted to ask what would find you, but the words tangled in your throat. The tired version of you glanced over their shoulder nervously, then reached into their pocket and pulled out a key. Not a small one, this was long, iron, and old enough that the metal was mottled with age. "This doesn't open the box," they whispered. "It opens the way out. But you have to decide now." Behind you, the ink on your arm burned hot, the letters pulsing faster. The box's glow intensified, casting deep shadows that crawled up the shelves like living things. Somewhere far away, or maybe just beyond the next shelf, the warped laughter of the smiling double returned. The heat from the ink on your arm was almost unbearable now, each throb of retrieve matching the pounding in your head. The box's glow bathed your hands in pale gold. It felt inevitable. But the key in the tired version of you's hand glinted faintly, as if catching a light source that wasn't in the room. The air between you both thickened, heavy with the smell of damp paper and dust that had been shut away for centuries. Your double's eyes darted from the box to you. "You don't understand what's inside," they said. "It doesn't belong to you. It doesn't belong to anyone." The glowing letters on your arm pulsed harder, and for a moment you thought you heard a second heartbeat in the room, slow, deep, resonating through the shelves themselves. Then, the pedestal trembled. The box shifted ever so slightly toward you, like a living thing eager to be held. The key dangled from your double's fingers. Their voice dropped to a near whisper. "If you take the key, you might make it out. If you take the box." They didn't finish the sentence. Behind you, something large moved in the shadows, its footsteps soft but deliberate. The air chilled. And you realized you had to choose. You stood perfectly still, the weight of the choice pressing on you like the air before a storm. The sound behind you was getting closer, slow, careful steps, as though the thing in the shadows knew you could hear it, and wanted you to know it was coming. Your tired double's hand shook slightly as they held the key toward you. The box's glow, brighter than before, seemed to reach up and wrap around your other wrist like invisible tendrils, urging you forward. The ink on your arm flared so hot it felt like fire under your skin. Retrieve. The word no longer just pulsed, it pressed into your thoughts, tugging your hand toward the lid. Somewhere above, deep in the towering shelves, a book fell. The sound was sharp, final, and yet you felt it in your ribs like a signal. Your breathing quickened. You reached out, and in that instant, you weren't entirely sure which hand you'd moved. The one toward the key, or the one toward the box. Your tired double's expression shifted, relief or horror, you couldn't tell. The steps in the shadows stopped. Silence. Your fingers made contact. If it was the key, the metal was ice-cold and heavy, its weight far greater than it looked. If it was the box, the surface was warm, too warm, like it had been waiting for you. But before you could confirm which you held, the thing in the shadows stepped into the glow. It wasn't entirely human. Its body was tall, elongated, draped in something like the shredded remains of library curtains, the fabric swaying as if underwater. Its head tilted slowly, the movement too smooth, too deliberate. You couldn't see its face, but you could feel its attention, not on your double, only on you. Your tired double backed away, their breath sharp and uneven. "You've got seconds," they whispered. "If you've chosen wrong." The creature moved without sound, closing half the distance in a single stride. The light from the box, or the gleam on the key, flickered, as though its presence dimmed everything around it. Somewhere, deep within the stacks, a faint, wet sound began, pages turning, but too slow, too sticky. The thing took another step forward. It was close enough now for you to see a thin, branching pattern beneath the pale skin of its hands, as though words had been written there and bled inwards, disappearing under the flesh. You realized with a start, those words matched the ones burning into your own arm. The creature's hands twitched, fingers curling slightly as if the letters under its skin itched. You could see them now, not random marks, but sentences, winding up its arms and disappearing under the torn fabric at its shoulders. Every few seconds, the words shifted, rearranging themselves, as though the creature's skin was rewriting its own story. Your own arm throbbed in answer. The ink burned so sharply you almost dropped what you were holding, the key or the box. Several books slid out on their own, hitting the floor with soft, muffled thumps, each one landing open to a page that bore your name. Your double's voice was urgent now. Whatever you're holding, it's tied to it. That's why it's here. They took a step back. If you keep it, it will follow you. If you give it back, they trailed off, glancing nervously toward the farthest shadows. The creature extended its hand toward you, palm up, waiting. From somewhere beyond the shelves, you heard a sound like rushing water, faint but getting louder. It was as though the library itself was tilting toward something. The rushing sound grew louder, filling the air until the floor beneath you seemed to hum with it. Somewhere far off, a single light flickered and went out, swallowed by the library's darkness. The creature's open palm stayed perfectly still, waiting. Its head lowered slightly, almost in a gesture of patience, or warning. Your tired double was edging toward the far aisle now, eyes darting between you and the shadows as though they knew something worse might be on its way. Once it takes it, they said softly, you might not get yourself back. But if you keep it. They shook their head, unwilling to finish the sentence. The ink on your arm blazed hotter than ever, the letters shifting under your skin until they no longer read retrieve, now they read return. You looked down at what you held. For the briefest moment, the object seemed unfamiliar, like it wasn't the same key or box you'd picked up. It was heavier, stranger, as though it had absorbed something from you in the seconds you'd possessed it. The rushing sound became a roar. A wind swept through the aisle, carrying with it the dry scent of pages older than memory. The creature's fingers twitched, and the words beneath its skin shifted again, now they matched the letters on your arm perfectly. Your heart pounded. If you placed the object in its palm, you might be free. If you didn't, you might learn what the library really was. You took one slow step forward. The air between you and the creature felt thick, like walking through water. Its hand remained steady, but you noticed the faintest tremor running up its arm, as if it, too, was not entirely certain what would happen when you made your choice. Your double's voice was faint now, nearly drowned out by the roaring sound that filled the library. It's not just giving it back, they said. It's giving back everything it's taken. Their eyes locked on yours. Everything you've forgotten. The word struck you in the chest. You hadn't realized you had forgotten anything, but as soon as they said it, gaps seemed to open in your thoughts. Faces you couldn't quite remember. A room you felt you'd been in before, though it was gone from your memory like a torn-out page. The letters on your arm burned again, but this time the heat was matched by a pull, a deep tug inside your chest, urging you toward the creature's waiting palm. The floor beneath you vibrated now, the shelves rattling as though the whole place was beginning to shift. From somewhere impossibly far away, a door slammed. Then another. Then dozens, until the sound was an unbroken thunder. Your double shouted something you couldn't hear. The creature took a single step closer, its palm now only inches from yours. Its voice, or the voices inside it, whispered. Now. Your hand hovered above the creature's palm. The object between your fingers pulsed faintly, as though it had a heartbeat of its own. For a moment, you thought you could feel it breathing. The roaring in the library became deafening, but under it, so faint you might have imagined it, you heard the turning of a single page. Your double was shouting something again, but now their voice was impossibly far away, like they were speaking from the other side of glass. The air shimmered between you and the creature, bending the shelves and lights into warped shapes. Then, you made your choice. The moment your decision left your body, everything went still. No wind. No sound. Even the smell of the old pages vanished. The creature slowly closed its hand, whether around the object or around nothing at all, you couldn't tell. It stepped back into the shadows, the words beneath its skin fading until only the faintest outline remained. Somewhere deep in the library, a door creaked open. A warm, golden light spilled across the aisle. It looked like sunlight. You turned toward it, heart pounding, but as you stepped forward, you realized you could no longer remember what you had been holding, or whether you had let it go. From behind you, the creature's voice, just one voice now, asked softly, "Do you think you chose the right ending?"